For nearly a year, the Middle Eastern nation of Israel and the non-state militant organization Hezbollah have walked a slow march toward war. Incensed by Israel's conduct in its ongoing war in the Gaza Strip and by Israel's devastation of its close ally Hamas, Hezbollah has engaged in near-daily battles with Israel all across Israel's shared border with Lebanon, where Hezbollah calls home. And incensed by Hezbollah's attack on its people and its sovereign territory, Israel has been ready, perhaps even eager to meet the change, attempting to stamp out the insurgency wherever its fighters and its leaders can be found. Since the start of this most recent low-grade conflict, the fighting has followed a set of rules that go unspoken, but mutually understood. Both sides have long accepted the prospect of a full-scale war, but both seek to avoid it, at least for now. And as a result, their attacks have followed a consistent pattern. They attack each other's fighting personnel, either avoid or deny civilian casualties on the opposing side, and try not to cross any of the red lines that would require their adversary to begin a full-scale war. But on Saturday, the 27th of July, 2024, everything began to fall apart. The attack came a bit before 6:30 in the evening local time in the town of Majdal Shams in the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights are a disputed territory. Israel has claimed it since the Six-Day War of 1967 and annexed it decades ago, but most of the international community continues to recognize it as occupied Syrian territory. In the town of Majdal Shams lives a predominantly Druze population, an Arabic-speaking group who adhere to their own Druze faith and who have been considered among Israel's most loyal citizens for decades now. At 6:30 p.m., when the air raid sirens went off, several dozen local residents were gathered at a football field and an adjoining playground. Most gathered there were teenagers. Just seconds after the siren sounded, a rocket crashed down in the park, believed to be an Iranian-made design fitted with a 53-kilogram warhead. 12 people were killed in the strike, all of them children or teenagers. Over 40 more have been reported wounded, some critically. Accounts from witnesses and community members in Majdal Shams are horrifying, with survivors reporting in detail the carnage of the rocket strike and the deaths of their families and friends. In the tightly interconnected community, one of just 4 Druze settlements in the Golan Heights, the death of each of the children has sent shockwaves across the population all at once. While we won't bring first-hand accounts of the strike to you today, for brevity's sake, those accounts do exist should you wish to read them. Instead, our focus today is the potential for wider war between Israel and Hezbollah and the strike of July the 27th that may have ensured that such a war is now coming. In the immediate aftermath of the strike, Israel reacted furiously. Speaking by phone with the leader of Israel's Druze community, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly vowed, quote, "Hezbollah will pay a heavy price, the kind it has thus far not paid." Said Israel's foreign minister, Israel Katz, on Israeli TV, quote, "There is no doubt that Hezbollah has crossed all the red lines here, and the response will reflect that. We are nearing the moment in which we face all-out war." Per Israel's chief military spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, the rocket attack was the deadliest single strike against Israel since the Hamas terror attack of October the 7th, 2023. Said Hagari in a statement quoting here, "We are in an escalating war. Children have been targeted, and those children are Druze Israeli citizens." The Israeli public was enraged not just with the death toll of the strike, but by the fact that the dead were children, true innocents, in a community whose involvement with the Israel-Hamas war was tangential at worst. In any nation around the world, the indiscriminate killing of a dozen children by a foreign enemy would be met with nothing short of outrage and horror, and Israel is no different. In a telling indicator of just how serious the strike was and just what all sides knew it meant for the future of the conflict, Hezbollah strongly denied having carried out the strike. A denial of any kind is rare for Hezbollah, and the force of the denials this time is nearly unprecedented, certainly in the current conflict. Hezbollah has offered an alternative explanation, namely that an Israeli interceptor missile failed when trying to intercept a Hezbollah rocket and crashed down in the football field. But quickly, it became clear to both sides that Israel wasn't having it, and in all likelihood, Israel was right not to. Before the strike and its impact were reported by Israel, Hezbollah had taken credit for an attack using the same kind of rocket that landed on the field, saying that it had struck a military headquarters a few kilometers away. No such strike ever came. Not only that, but the Iranian-made Falak 1 rocket used in the attack is in the arsenal of Hezbollah, and in precisely 0 of the arsenals of other organizations that operate anywhere near the attack. Per the Associated Press regarding intelligence assessments by Israel's closest ally, the United States, quote, US intelligence officials have no doubts that Hezbollah carried out the attack on the Golan Heights, but it was not clear if the militant group intended the target or misfired, according to a person familiar with the matter who was not authorized to comment publicly. Early on July the 28th, the Israel Defense Forces, or IDF, announced that it had carried out retaliatory attacks against 7 Hezbollah targets, quote, deep inside Lebanese territory. Those strikes hit targets as far as 100 kilometers from Israel's northern border. Their impact, however, is still unclear, at least in the public domain, and any casualties among Hezbollah's ranks or any impact on the group's military capabilities is as yet unknown. Hezbollah claimed that it too had retaliated in turn after those strikes, although there have not been any similarly impactful attacks by Hezbollah that would rival the strike on the football pitch in Majd al-Shams, at least not yet. While the retaliatory strikes by Israel certainly don't draw down the conflict, they weren't thought to escalate tensions outright. But if any onlooker around the world had believed that that might be cause to hope for de-escalation, it now appears that they would have been sorely mistaken. In an emergency meeting on July the 29th, Israel's Security Cabinet authorized Prime Minister Netanyahu and his defense minister to decide when and how Israel's real retaliation for the Hezbollah attack will be carried out. In advance of the meeting, the United States and other allied nations have urged Israel to show restraint despite the tragedy. But at the time of writing, it's an open question just what Israel's response will look like. One thing that's known with relative certainty is that the next round of Israeli strikes will be far more expansive than those of July the 28th. Israeli officials interviewed by Reuters have indicated that the next phase might involve a few days of fighting, perhaps referring to the idea of a limited incursion rather than an all-out assault, while other sources have attested that, quote, Israel wants to hurt Hezbollah but not drag the Middle East into all-out war. Israeli newspapers have quoted other anonymous officials as saying that the retaliatory strikes will be, quote, limited but significant. Anything from attacks on infrastructural targets to strikes on weapons depots to decapitating attacks on the Hezbollah command. But international companies aren't waiting around to find out. Air France, Lufthansa, Swiss International Airlines, and Eurowings have all suspended flights out of the capital city of Lebanon, Beirut, in anticipation that the worst is yet to come. As of now, it appears that the coming round of Israeli strikes are not a question of if, but of when, and it's there that the issue of all-out war will be decided. For the entire duration of this conflict, Israel and Hamas have been locked in an escalating cycle. One side ups the intensity of their attacks, the other side responds by matching that intensity. Eventually, one side does something even more devastating and the cycle repeats. This time, Hezbollah's destruction has reached a level that killed 12 children and teenagers. And if the cycle of this conflict so far predicts where it's headed in the future, then Israel's retaliation will be something of that scale and severity. How one converts the killing of innocent children into a supposedly proportional military strike, we have no idea. But whatever answer Israel ultimately comes to, it would be a mistake to assume that Hezbollah won't try to match it. Israel can march troops into Lebanon for a few days and pull out in hopes that they've made their point. But in the rhythm of this entire conflict, the likely Hezbollah response is not to simply accept such an attack. The response, if Israeli boots are on the ground in Lebanon, is to begin retaliatory strikes by Hezbollah militants striking southward into Israel. Explained expert Gershon Baskin, Middle East director of the International Communities Organization, when speaking to NBC News, quoting him here, "This is exactly the kind of thing that can send us into a spiral. Hezbollah is not going to take this sitting down, and their ability to do damage to Israel is 100 times bigger than Hamas. The amount of firepower that both sides have can do an enormous amount of damage and kill a lot of people." Adding later, quote, "Escalation is never planned. It spins out of control." Over the course of the current Israel-Hezbollah conflict, both sides have consistently made serious errors while trying to signal to each other through military means. A strike that one side intends as a deterrent is interpreted by the other as a provocation. A statement by one side cooked up in back rooms by people hoping to calm tensions is taken by the other side as a threat. Neither side has shown that it can predict the other's behavior with any level of competence, let alone reliability, and for Israel to launch its anticipated offensive expecting anything other than for Hezbollah to keep that same energy in retaliation, well, that would be deeply misguided. Even if Israel did accurately assess that possibility, it might choose to launch a larger attack anyhow. But if Israel goes in expecting a one-sided affair, then the history of this very conflict suggests that it'll find itself sorely mistaken. Now, a few weeks ago on this channel, we published a lengthy episode trying to explain just what an Israel-Hezbollah war would look like, and just how ruinous for both sides it could eventually become. For those looking to learn more about the phase of violence that we may soon see on the horizon, we strongly recommend checking that video out. But to summarize, Hezbollah is a far more capable enemy than the Hamas organization in Gaza has ever been. It possesses rockets and drones in numbers estimated at over 100,000, making it more than capable of wave attacks that would completely overwhelm Israel's air defenses. Its tens of thousands of foot soldiers are spread across fortifications and an expansive network of tunnels far larger than the tunnel system found in Gaza. Thousands of Hezbollah fighters are well-trained, experienced combat veterans who've learned valuable lessons during the Syrian civil war. Their commander units are widely regarded as being truly elite. This is an organization that can do real damage to the IDF and also to the Israeli public, not in hours-long attacks like what Hamas did on October the 7th, but sustained across weeks or even months of asymmetric insurgency. And the IDF, still dealing with a morphing insurgency by Hamas in Gaza and badly in need of an opportunity to rest and resupply some of its combat units, still does have the military power to conclusively beat Hezbollah in a conflict, but not to steamroll it. If there is a war, it will be difficult, protracted, and bloody. Now, that war might well be imminent, with Israel and Hezbollah locked into a cycle with few available off-ramps, even fewer military and political leaders willing to entertain moderation, and 12 dead youths for Israel to avenge. What happens in the coming days will decide whether this crisis can be averted, but it's now or it's never. Either some major de-escalating factor comes along right now to shift the tides, or Israel and Hezbollah will be at war before the next month is out. For the sake of the people caught in the middle, we certainly hope that the world can stop what comes next. But we're not optimistic, and frankly, nor should anyone be.